He was 36, a mechanic whose reputation travelled quietly through the city without ever touching the polished halls of wealth. His workshop stood behind an old textile warehouse, the kind of place people only found if they were desperate or curious enough to look past appearances. The door creaked when it opened, and the air always smelled of oil and metal, but inside everything worked. That mattered more to him than paint or polish. He had learned his trade from his father, a man who believed machines reflected the people who owned them. Neglected long enough, even the finest creations would fail. Treated with patience, even the most broken things could be brought back to life. His father died before he could see how deeply those lessons would shape his son. One morning, a Rolls-Royce was delivered to the workshop on a flatbed truck. Even in its broken state, it looked out of place among rusted engines and aging sedans. Its body was flawless, but the engine was silent, stubborn, and unmoved by any effort. Along with the car came a man in his late 50s, dressed in an expensive suit, carrying authority the way some people carried weight. Beside him stood a young woman in her mid-20s, elegant and reserved, her expression carefully neutral. The older man wasted no time. He explained that the Rolls-Royce had belonged to his late wife. It was priceless to him, not because of money, but because of memory. Every specialist he trusted had failed to fix it. The car refused to start, and the problem had humiliated some of the best engineers money could buy. Then he said something that made the air in the workshop feel heavier. If the mechanic could fix the car, he would consider him as a potential husband for his daughter. The words were delivered half as a challenge, half as a joke, but there was something sharp underneath. The daughter stiffened, her eyes flashing briefly with embarrassment and irritation. She said nothing, though her silence spoke loudly. The mechanic didn't react the way they expected. He didn't laugh, didn't bristle, didn't look offended or tempted. He wiped his hands on a rag and asked to see the keys. That response unsettled the father. He had expected anger or eagerness. Instead, he got professionalism. The mechanic opened the hood slowly, studying the engine with quiet focus. He listened, tapped, tested, and asked questions no one else had bothered to ask. Not about cost, not about status, but about when the car had last been driven, what sounds it made before failing, and how it had been stored. The daughter watched him closely. She had grown up surrounded by men who tried to impress her father. Loud voices, confident promises, polished lies. This man was different. He didn't perform. He worked. He asked for time and privacy. The father hesitated, then agreed, though doubt was clear in his eyes. As they left, the daughter lingered for a moment, her gaze meeting the mechanic's. She looked like someone used to being watched but rarely understood. The workshop returned to silence. The mechanic worked through the day and into the night. The Rolls-Royce was not simply broken. It was wounded by neglect, masked as preservation. Rarely driven, constantly polished, its systems had stiffened, seals dried, and components lost their balance. Wealth had kept it clean, but not alive. He dismantled parts carefully, laying them out like pieces of a puzzle. He discovered a fault hidden deep within the fuel delivery system, a flaw so subtle that replacing parts wouldn't fix it. It required adjustment, patience, and respect for the machine's original design. As he worked, he thought about the words the father had spoken. Marriage offered like a prize, a daughter treated like leverage. He felt no anger, only clarity. If he fixed the car, it would be because the car deserved it, not because of any bargain. The next day, the father returned alone. He asked how long it would take. The mechanic answered honestly, days, maybe weeks. The father frowned but said nothing. Later that afternoon, the daughter returned by herself. She didn't announce who she was. She simply asked if she could watch. The mechanic nodded. They spoke little at first. She asked technical questions, and he answered without condescension. She admitted she knew nothing about engines, but wanted to understand why this car mattered so much to her father. He listened, then told her about his own father, about memory trapped in metal, about why fixing something wasn't always about function. Something softened in her. Over the next few days, she came often. Sometimes she brought coffee. Sometimes she just sat quietly, reading while he worked. She began to see the patience in his movements, the care with which he handled even the smallest component. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He simply respected his craft. One evening, as rain hammered against the roof, she asked him directly what he thought of her father's offer. He paused, then said he didn't believe marriage should ever be a reward. She laughed softly, surprised, and said she agreed. That answer stayed with her. By the end of the second week, the car was nearly ready. The mechanic reassembled the engine slowly, checking every detail twice. On the final night, he sat alone in the workshop, staring at the Rolls-Royce as if listening to its breathing. When he turned the key, the engine responded immediately, smooth and dignified, like it had been waiting. The next morning, the father arrived with his daughter and a team of advisors. He looked skeptical, prepared to hide disappointment behind authority. The mechanic said nothing dramatic. He simply invited them closer and started the car. The sound filled the space, deep and controlled. The father froze. His expression shifted from disbelief to something dangerously close to emotion. The daughter covered her mouth, eyes wide. The car was not just running, it was alive. The father stepped forward, hand trembling as he touched the hood. He turned to the mechanic, stunned, and laughed. He said he had underestimated him. He repeated the offer, this time more seriously, framing it as respect, as opportunity. The mechanic met his gaze calmly and declined. The room went silent. He said he was honored by the trust placed in him, but that he would not accept a deal that treated a person as a prize. He fixed the car because it deserved fixing, not because he wanted anything in return. The father stared at him, shocked. No one had ever refused him so plainly. The daughter felt something break open inside her chest. For the first time, someone had stood up, not just for himself, but for her, without asking her to speak. The father paid the bill, far higher than the mechanic had asked. As they prepared to leave, the daughter lingered again. She thanked him, not for the car, but for the answer he gave. Weeks passed. The Rolls-Royce returned often, not because it was broken, but because the daughter asked to visit the workshop. Sometimes she came with questions, sometimes with silence. The mechanic never assumed anything. He treated her as an equal, not an heiress. The father watched from a distance, confused by a man he couldn't control with money or offers. Slowly, respect replaced pride. When the daughter finally chose, it wasn't because of a bargain or a challenge. It was because she had seen the difference between possession and partnership. The mechanic never chased wealth, and the heiress never forgot the man who fixed a car, refused a deal, and showed her what choice truly meant.